Top 5 biggest F1 stories of 2022. The Formula One drivers have the perfect opportunity to evaluate their performances thus far in the season during the summer break. Although they will gain the most insight from their worst weekends, they will always have their best games to remind them of what's possible when everything clicks. Over the first 13 races of the season, 20 drivers competed in 260 separate race weekends. We used our driver ratings features after the race to narrow it down to the top 5 finishers and use those. These consider the driver's overall weekend performance in comparison to the car's capabilities. Due to the system's emphasis on error avoidance, the best drives represent weekends in which the driver performed admirably at every critical juncture and made no major gaffes. Only one driver has received a perfect score thus far this year, and only 5 have received a 9.5. Including the one perfect scorer. So, without further ado, here are the 5 best shows of the year, according to the race. 5. Esteban Ocon. 5th, Austrian Grand Prix. Rating 9.5. This driver's consistent performance in a mid-pack car throughout the course of the weekend was exemplary, with Sergio Perez's Red Bull and Lewis Hamilton's Mercedes both having mechanical issues. Esteban Ocon qualified 6th in the Alpine. When Alpine teammate Fernando Alonso crashed on entry to Turn 1, it was close to being a foregone conclusion that Ocon would win. Ocon finished 6th after losing out to a resurgent Perez in the final sprint. But he almost won the race when his fuel pump failed on the final lap. On race day, he finished 6th after Perez wrecked into George Russell on the opening lap and had to pull out of the race. Ocon ran a rather unremarkable race. However, Russell eventually overtook him, but the smooth sailing on Sunday was due to a successful Friday and Saturday that ensured the greatest possible outcome at every critical juncture over the weekend. 4. Pierre Gasly. 5th, Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Rating 9.5. The AlphaTauri's high mechanical grip allows it to excel on tracks that feature many slower corners. And Pierre Gasly made the most of his opportunities in Baku. He qualified in 6th place, albeit he may have run faster than Russell, and therefore qualified in 5th. That's why he couldn't get a perfect score of 10 out of 10. After starting the race in 6th place, Gasly took advantage of the early VSC to make a pit stop, which allowed him to pass 5 cars and leave Hamilton in his dust. Due to the Ferrari's exit, Gasly is now in 4th place, just ahead of Hamilton. Perhaps he could have stayed, but with just soft rubber left, he was forced to leave when the second VSC was activated. The result was that Hamilton eventually overtook him. Perhaps he could have kept up with the Mercedes if he hadn't been hampered in that way. 3. Lewis Hamilton. 2nd, Hungarian Grand Prix. Rating 9.5. Since Hamilton appeared to be the faster Mercedes driver, he may have been able to take pole position if he hadn't lost the DRS at the beginning of the final Q3 lap. He started from 7th on the starting grid and made quick work of the Alpines. It took him 12 laps to figure out how to get around Lando Norris, but he didn't lose too much ground to the front 3. Although he was passed by Max Verstappen at the first pit stop, he was able to pass Carlos Sainz and Russell on their way to 2nd place by completing a long middle stint on medium tires, and then switching to softs for the final stint. Hamilton concluded, with a big and strong qualifying, if the DRS was okay, we would have been in the running for the win. It's plausible, but even if that's the case, his run to 2nd was well executed on a weekend where he was the superior Mercedes driver, despite Russell starting on pole. 2. Sebastian Vettel. 8th, Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. Rating 9.5. At Imola, the Aston Martin was unequivocally not a top 10 car, but Sebastian Vettel drove superbly all weekend long. Making the most of the rain, he qualified 10th in a car that had no business being there. The fact that he dropped from 9th to 13th in the sprint was indicative of this. His position only reflected the speed of the car, but the Grand Prix itself, with its many strategic options, presented even more possibilities. After a strong start that allowed him to gain 2 spots, Vettel moved up to 7th place as a result of contact between Daniel Ricciardo and Carlos Sainz, and the subsequent damage to Fernando Alonso's car. He passed Kevin Magnussen for 6th after becoming the 2nd driver to switch to slicks. He lost to Yuki Tsunoda's speedier AlphaTauri, although finishing 8th was impressive considering the equipment. It feels like a win, Vettel added. In all candor, we are not the quickest team right now. I believe we are on the opposite side of the field at this point, but we performed admirably. The weekend improved the weather, and we took advantage of it. Everyone else seemed to follow our lead once we called for the dries, which was a huge success. 1. Max Verstappen, first Canadian Grand Prix, rating 10. Verstappen aced wet qualifying and didn't make a single mistake over the course of the weekend, which led to the only perfect score of the year so far. Ferrari was fast enough to win, yes. He benefited from Charles Leclerc being eliminated from contention due to a back-of-the-grid penalty for engine component alterations, but he might have still lost out to Sainz. He secured the pole position ahead of Alonso by a huge 0.645 seconds and maintained his advantage at the start. In the end, he took Sainz pressure as well. This weekend was a textbook example of how a driver can take command and make it look easy while actually having to exert a great deal of effort to pull off a stunning victory. The 9.5 rating Verstappen received for his Imola victory was close to placing him in the top 5.